Thanks for joining me. This is Ajay Nair, the psychiatrist and Chiefs fan from Steeler Thoughts and Chief Feelings. Chris is out this week, but there are a couple topics that have been kind of percolating around the NFL and really specifically the Chiefs sphere that I had some thoughts about. So I thought we'd kind of discuss them on just a quick video. So here are 4 things that I've been thinking about related to the Chiefs that I wanted to discuss. The first one has been quarterback contracts. So this has been in the news a lot. Tua Tagovailoa, Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Love all got new contracts, and they're all well above $50 million a year. I think Tua's at $53.1 million a year. Trevor Lawrence and Jordan Love are both at $55 million a year. The reason why this comes up in the Chiefs world a lot is because everyone talks about Mahomes' contract, the 10-year, $450 million extension that he signed way back in the offseason in 2020, but really kicked in 2022 after his rookie contract plus the added fifth-year option ended. And so, people are starting to the narrative that Mahomes is underpaid. He's getting $45 million a year when you look at breaking up the salary year by year. And as we mentioned, Tua, Trevor Lawrence, and Jordan Love are all well above that. So I wanted to discuss that narrative a little bit. I wanted to look into the Mahomes contract a little more to give us an idea of, is Mahomes really underpaid? Is that a fair narrative, seeing that, as you can see over here, his average salary at $45 million a year, as we've said, is well below what Tua Tagovailoa, Jordan Love, and Trevor Lawrence are getting. So when we look at contracts, there are a couple of things that we want to think about. First of all, NFL contracts are not guaranteed, which is different from, NBA and MLB contracts. Those are fully guaranteed. The players that sign those contracts are getting all the money in that contract once they sign. If you look at Patrick Mahomes' contract, you can see that at signing, his guaranteed money was $63 million. And the total guarantees in the contract are $141 million. So even somebody like him, you're looking at, of the $450 million in his contract, only $141 million is guaranteed. Now, this is a little less important when you're looking at someone of Mahomes' caliber, because it's not like the Chiefs are going to cut him, right? So we don't really have to consider it as strongly. But the other things that you want to think about are the cash flow and the cap hit of his contract. The cash flow is important because that tells you how much the player is actually getting per year. And it's important to the owner too, because that's how much money the owner is actually shelling out to give the player. If you look at the cash in Mahomes' contract, you look at him getting, this year his cash flow is $45.75 million. Then he's going to be at 50, and then in 2026, 56.75, and in 2027, 52.9 million. So that actually is a total of $215.6 million over that 4-year span, according to Pro Football Talk, that Mike Florio over there is saying that that's actually the top number over that period. So even though Mahomes is getting $45 million a year in his contract, which is lower than a lot of quarterbacks, his actual cash flow over the next 4 years is the highest in the league. So from that perspective, Mahomes really isn't underpaid. Another thing that you want to look at is the cap breakdown. And why this is important is it tells you kind of how viable this contract is and whether there are going to be any changes made to it. If you look at the year 2022, that was the first year that this contract kicked in for Mahomes. Mahomes' cap hit was $35.7 million, or really $35.8 if you round up, which gave him a 17.19% of the Chiefs' cap that year. Why is that important? That actually set an NFL record for the highest proportion of the cap taken by a quarterback on a Super Bowl winning team. The prior record was 13%, held by Steve Young when the 49ers won the Super Bowl after the 94 season. So, as you see, the second highest was 13. So the next year, when Mahomes won the Super Bowl again, he was at 16.52%. So he has the two largest proportions of the cap ever held by a Super Bowl winning quarterback. This coming year, he's at 14.49%, but then in 2025, this contract goes to 24.2%, 23.4%. So you got to think, like, are the Chiefs going to do that? Are they going to dedicate that much of their cap? You know, you're looking at 7% more than what the cap he had when he was the highest cap proportion quarterback of any to win a Super Bowl. I'm not so sure that Brett Veach is going to be dedicating that much of the cap to Mahomes if he wants to continue making a viable team. That gives me a high suspicion that in this coming offseason, they may be ripping up this contract and redoing it entirely. So, you know, his contract might look entirely different next year. We might be talking about a completely different annual salary. Additionally, you know, to kind of drive that point home, we can look at how the Chiefs have been spending their cap year by year. So this was last year when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. Mahomes had 16.5% of the cap. Chris Jones had 11.9%. So you're getting a total of about just around 28% of the cap was held by the top two for the Chiefs. 28%, and they won the Super Bowl that year. So now let's go up to this year. If you go to this year, you've got 14.5, about 10.5. So you're looking at about 25% of their cap is taken up by Mahomes, and this time it's Joe Tooney, who's the second highest cap hit. Chris Jones has an extension coming in, so his cap number is very low in his first year. So now you're looking at about 25% for the top two guys. So remember, we won the Super Bowl with about 28. This year we have 25. In 2025, this is going to balloon up to 36.9, about 37% if you combine Mahomes and Chris Jones for your top two players. Another indication that there's probably going to be some restructuring going on. Now, I don't know. Brett Veach and his crew have really been wizards with the cap. Maybe they can have that high of a cap hit for Mahomes and still figure out a way to build a good team around him. But remember, they're going to be paying Trent McDuffie soon. They have this year Bolton, Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith are all coming up. So they're going to have to pay some guys coming up soon. So it's difficult to see them devoting that much of their cap. If you remember, Mahomes has the record for the highest percentage of cap taken up by a Super Bowl winning quarterback, and it's down at 17%. So I guess the conclusion of this is, A, Mahomes' cash flow is the highest in the league right now over this 4-year span, and this contract that we're looking at for Mahomes may be short-lived. They may be rewriting this in order to give themselves some cap flexibility, so Mahomes may soon be, even on other metrics like salary per year, he might end up being the highest paid quarterback in any case. Next topic. The next thing that I wanted to discuss was Ja'Marr Chase. Ja'Marr Chase has been in the news because of the video that came out with the NFL Top 100 in which he refused to say Patrick Mahomes' name. So in this video here, Ja'Marr Chase is being asked who the number one player is, and he refused to say his name, as you can see. Instead, he decides to say Joe Burrow. I will say, like, he gives Mahomes his props, and he admits that he's salty. And I think that this clip, it got a lot of notoriety around Kansas City because, you know, Ja'Marr Chase is a trash talker, and he enjoys the rivalry with the Chiefs, and he generally doesn't have good things to say about the Chiefs. I actually don't really have a problem with this clip. I am surprised if people are upset about it. I think, you know, we like rivalries in sports. I understand why Ja'Marr Chase wouldn't like the Chiefs. The Chiefs have been winning Super Bowls, and he has not yet won one. His last playoff trip was ended by the Chiefs. So And I don't know, from a Chiefs fan perspective, like, he is giving Mahomes credit as being the best player. He's admitting that he's salty, and he's saying that he just doesn't want to say his name. I'm not really sure that this would be the kind of thing to get upset about from a Chiefs fan perspective. Like, you get why he's mad. And he's still accepting of and recognizing Mahomes' greatness. The thing that's a little more confusing about Ja'Marr Chase is he's got a little bit of a track record of not handling losing well. So I feel like when you're a trash talker, if you don't back up the trash talk, like if you lose the game, then maybe not the time to trash talk, you know? Maybe that should be a situation where you kind of keep it quiet, you know? You said your piece, you lost your game. All right, the other guy got you this time. And I think that's the area where I find Ja'Marr Chase a little more perplexing. This is from last offseason. The Chiefs had beaten the Bengals in the AFC Championship game. Joe Burrow said that Patrick Mahomes was the best quarterback in the league, and Ja'Marr Chase was asked about it, and his response was, "Pat who?" And there was a very famous response to that from Patrick Mahomes at the Chiefs ring ceremony that year when he tweeted out, "That's who," with his 2 rings. But Ja'Marr Chase is a little bit of a pattern of this. Like, they had a game against the Browns after which, you know, he had called the Browns elves. They have this like alternate mascot which looks like an elf. And he said, "I'm just frustrated because I called their elves and we just lost to some elves." And again, like, he just doesn't seem to get that, like, you know, when you've lost, like, just take the loss. And when you're going to play somebody else again, like, go right back to the trash talk. He's a good trash talker. I like the competitive spirit, but it is interesting to me when he, you know, once you've said your piece and your team hasn't backed it up on the field, like, maybe that's a time to stay quiet. However, this instance of him, like, not wanting to say Patrick Mahomes' name, I don't really have any problem with, because like I said, he is respectful of Mahomes' ability. He's just salty about it, and he admits as much. I don't see anything wrong with that. The next topic I wanted to hit is the Chiefs left tackle battle. This and cornerback 2 are the 2 starting positions that are still up for grabs in training camp, and I think the left tackle battle has been probably the most prominent of all. And the reason why I wanted to talk about it is, does it say more to us about Wanya Morris or Kingsley Suamataia? I think that, you know, we've been really excited about Kingsley coming in. I think a lot of people have mentioned, those who know much more about offensive line play than I do, that he's got a lot of physical tools, but maybe is not quite a solid technician at this point. And I think coaches and analysts get really excited about these people because they start to project what they're able to do. But it also is worth noting that Kingsley Suamataia did fall to the 63rd pick. So when you're looking at like relative investment in them, Wanya Morris was the 92nd pick a year ago. So you're looking at like the 92nd pick plus a year in the NFL, which included 4 starts, compared to a 63rd overall rookie. So the fact that Kingsley seems to be the guy that's being promoted by the team more, I don't know that, you know, it's not like this is a first round pick that they're talking about that you would automatically slot him in. You know, big time left tackle is one of those positions that, you know, the big time Hall of Fame all pro caliber players are usually first round guys. You know, it's great if you can find a mid to late round pick and they end up being a good left tackle, but that shouldn't always be the expectation. So I think how you view Kingsley depends a little bit on how you feel about the rumors that the Chiefs liked him much earlier in the draft and maybe even would have been comfortable taking him in the first round. Because otherwise, pick 92 with 1 year of experience and 4 starts, you'd think would be right around where pick 63 as a rookie would be. So the fact that Kingsley's being pushed more may say more about Wanya Morris and the fact that they haven't seen what they think they need to see for him to be a starting left tackle than, you know, Kingsley being superb in any way. Here's a clip from Brandon Thorne showing Wanye against the Raiders. This was the game in Vegas. He very famously did not play so well against the Raiders in Kansas City. But as a run blocker, he's really shown the ability to move the line. He has a lot of functional strength. As a pass protector, too, in that game, he seemed to hold his own pretty well. This was a really promising effort from him. However, as this clip from Daniel Harms shows, he did really have his struggles against good pass rushers. And this actually, even after this Patriots game, here Josh Uche really gets the better of him. But he really struggled when the Raiders got Max Crosby across from him on Christmas Day. So I think there's a lot of question about Wanye's ability as a pass protector. And of course, that's going to be very important when Patrick Mahomes is your quarterback and Andy Reid is calling your offense, because that's really going to be the major way that you're trying to move the ball. The run game is important in Kansas City, but it's always going to be a bit of an afterthought. So really, it seems like we're kind of pinning our hopes on Kingsley Suamataia, that the kind of physical traits and tools that we see are going to be combined with some technique improvements, and that'll lead him to be a good starting left tackle. I would just caution, I'm as hopeful as everybody that this is going to work out, but ultimately he is at the end of the second round, and if we get a good functional starting tackle in that position, I feel like that's fantastic. I don't know that I would be expecting an otherworldly tackle, but if he's able to get there, I'll be as happy as anybody. And the last topic of the day, contract extensions. The 2021 draft produced quite a few good players. And as always happens when you draft good players, 4 years later, decisions have to be made about whether you're going to keep these players or move on from them. So let's talk about a couple of these guys, starting with, I think, the elephant in the room, which is Nick Bolton. It feels like across Chiefs fans, people are really just kind of assuming that this is going to happen. Nick Bolton is going to be signed and he's going to make a lot of money. That seems to be the assumption. And you understand why people think that. Steve Spagnuolo has been effusive in his praise of Nick Bolton over and over again. And he particularly talks a lot about Nick Bolton's ability to understand the game, to know who needs to be where, to know what needs to be called, to get everybody set up, get everybody lined up, get everybody in the right place. To be fair, though, as was pointed out by Seth Kaiser of the Only Weird Games podcast on Kansas City Sports Network, he said very much the same kind of things about Anthony Hitchens. And Anthony Hitchens, once he left Kansas City, a starting role in Kansas City where he started the AFC Championship game, he didn't play another snap in the NFL after that. Now, I'm not comparing that to Nick Bolton. I think Nick Bolton is a better player today than Anthony Hitchens was in his last season with Kansas City. But it's worth noting that Steve Spagnuolo will heap effusive praise on people, especially for their leadership, even in situations where they're not coming back or they're not really that valued across the league. I think this is important because Nick Bolton, for as good of a player as he is, and I think he has been fantastic in Kansas City, I'm not sure he's a $15 to $20 million a year linebacker. Nick Bolton's thing throughout his time, in addition to, having people lined up well and getting the team in position, has been splash plays. And man, does Nick Bolton make some memorable splash plays. Bolton has always been excellent against the run. He's been excellent going downhill. Made some huge plays in big games that I think we all remember. But I do think it's important not to let just the, splash plays, the big plays, cloud our judgment of what level of a linebacker Nick Bolton is. Unfortunately, he's not a Roquan Smith or a Fred Warner. He is a linebacker who I feel like will make good money and should make good money. But when you have Drew Tranquill, who's now at $6.3 million a year with the new contract extension he signed here in Kansas City, it's hard for me to see that Nick Bolton is levels of magnitude better than Drew Tranquill. If Drew Tranquill is worth $6.3 million, is Nick Bolton worth 10? Yeah, I could see that. He's younger. They do really value his leadership, but to be 3 times what Drew Tranquill is worth, that just doesn't seem like good accounting. I'm not really sure that makes sense from a Chiefs perspective. And on that note, I really do think, I think we should be prepared for the possibility that Nick Bolton's not around after this year. I don't know. I think they do really like him, and if they could get him for 10 to 12 million a year, like, this might happen. But the Chiefs also are not that prone to spend on their own draft picks. I mean, if we think about the players that they have brought in and spent a lot of money on, they've been external players. Anthony Hitchens, as we brought up before, Frank Clark, when they had traded for him on the franchise tag and then gave him a big deal, bringing in Jawan Taylor from outside, Sammy Watkins signing in free agency. The guys who have been considered by Chiefs players to be like big ticket, Joe Thuney, they've all come from outside. There haven't been a ton of guys that Veach has drafted that Veach has then backed up the Brinks truck to, except for Patrick Mahomes. So I would be cautious. I think people are kind of assuming Bolton's going to be back. And look, if he's back on a good deal, I would love it. I do really like Nick Bolton. I confess that I am a Mizzou fan, so I have even more reason to like Nick Bolton, but I just wouldn't be so certain that he's going to be back in Kansas City after this season. The next 2021 draft pick to talk about is Creed Humphrey. Creed Humphrey is another player that I feel like people are generally assuming is going to be back next year, and with good reason. He is considered by many to be among the best centers in the league. It was him and Jason Kelce for a little while going back and forth. Now it's him and Frank Ragnow that are going back and forth. And he has shown to be adept both as a pass protector and as a run blocker. The one thing to consider with Creed Humphrey, first of all, people will bring up his snapping. I think he's been a little inconsistent snapping the ball, especially, I think, in the last 2 Super Bowls the Chiefs have played in. There was rumor that he kind of changed the snapping technique this year, and maybe that had something to do with it as far as how he looked this year. I don't know how to explain his wayward snaps against the Eagles last year. I'm not sure that that's going to factor in that much. Like, it doesn't seem like it hinders Mahomes that much, and it does seem like something I would assume he's going to get corrected. So I'm not really thinking about his snapping too much when considering whether he's going to be with the team. I will say that the one thing I would consider, the Chiefs have kind of been in this position before. In 2015, we drafted Mitch Morse, who he was actually a left tackle at Mizzou, although he did play some center there too. And we had him play center for 4 years for us and then let him walk in free agency. And he ended up signing a 4-year, $44.5 million contract with Buffalo. There is one confounding factor in the Mitch Morse situation, though, which makes it maybe less predictive for Creed's situation, and that is that over the last 2 years of his contract, that would be 2017 and 2018, Mitch Morse played a total of 18 games. He played 7 games in 2017, and he played 11 in 2018. So that may kind of factor into the reason why the Chiefs let him walk. Maybe they weren't as comfortable with the fact that he would be on the field. One reason why Creed might be coming back is that the center market is not nearly as high as the rest of the offensive line. So it would be easier to bring in Creed, have him come back on a contract that wasn't eating up as much of the cap as re-signing another offensive line position. On that note, let's move over one to another offensive line spot, and let's talk about Trey Smith and his potential for an extension. Trey Smith, the situation is pretty tough. guards have gotten very expensive now. Landon Dickerson just signed for $21 million a year this offseason. That makes it now 5 guards that are making $20 million a year or more. I think fairly reasonably, most people would agree that Trey Smith is a level below a Creed Humphrey or a Joe Thuney. But he does seem to be viewed very positively through the NFL. So it's not clear that if Trey Smith hits the open market that he wouldn't get that kind of 20 million plus per year contract. And it's just hard to imagine the Chiefs giving that out to him. You know, we've kind of talked about their cap situation. They're paying Chris Jones. They're paying Patrick Mahomes. If they do give Creed a decent amount of money, we've already talked about the fact that Trent McDuffie is going to be coming up soon. There are only so many guys you can pay, and it's difficult to say whether they would be able to pay Trey Smith the kind of money that guards are getting these days, and I think Trey Smith would get that on the open market. So this one's a little more difficult for me to see happening. Another thing to consider with the Trey Smith situation is that the Chiefs have already paid Joe Thuney. So we have a guard that's making a lot of money. Joe Thuney's cap hit's going to be north of $26 million for the next 2 seasons. They could theoretically get out from under Joe Thuney's contract after this year. So maybe that's a bit of a moot point. I think they would have about $10.9 million in dead cap if they did that, with a total cap saving of about $16 million. So if your thought is that they'd pay Trey and let Thuney walk, I guess that's possible. But in that scenario, then do you see Creed staying as well? It's a little hard to say. So I think if I were to kind of rank the ones we've discussed so far, I feel like Creed is probably the most likely because the center cap hit will be a little lower. The center salaries are a little lower. I think next would be Bolton, assuming he gets, a deal that's fairly substantially less than the kind of Fred Warner, Roquan Smith, the 19 to 20 million a year. If Bolton is under 15, preferably to me like at 12 or lower, then I think he's back. But I wouldn't be surprised, if Bolton, people are excited about Bolton on the open market and the Chiefs let him walk. It's just not been their MO to pay their guys except for those that are elite. And I feel like even those of us that are huge Nick Bolton fans, we wouldn't call him elite as good as he is. And Trey Smith, I feel like he will not be a Chief next year. I think he's just going to command too much money, and at some point, somebody's got to walk, So if I were, I think to me the only really surprise, just based on how the discourse has been, is that I could see Bolton being back, but I'm not as convinced as everyone is that it's a done deal, that it's certain. And the last player to discuss that's coming up is Noah Gray. He's the last player from that 21 draft class that has been very heavily featured on the team. Noah Gray is a solid tight end too. The Chiefs do have Jared Wiley, who they drafted this year, who we'll see kind of how his rookie year goes. This year, Gray will clearly be the tight end too. It remains to be seen whether Jared Wiley is capable of taking that spot. But Noah Gray is a solid. He looks like he's going to be a 300 yards, 1 to 2 touchdown a year guy. Maybe he'll take a little bit of a leap up, but with the number of pass catchers that the Chiefs have, I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of stays stagnant in that area. So then the question is, what's the market for someone like Noah Gray to be? I could really see him coming back if he gets, a kind of low-end deal, if he wants to re-sign. A lot of the Chiefs' kind of mid to later round draft picks that have come back, you think Derek Nottie keeps coming back on 1-year deals on the minimum. If it's like a 1 year, $4 million deal or something, I could see Noah Gray coming back. So I do think he's fairly likely to come back. I'm not sure there'll be a huge market for him, but who knows. If he gets the kind of contract that like Irv Smith got this year for the Chiefs, like I could see him coming back. I'm not expecting like a multi-year deal for him, but I could see Noah Gray coming back if the money's right. All right. Well, that was the 4 things that have been kind of percolating in my mind that I wanted to discuss today. Appreciate you taking the time. I will be out next week, so we won't be recording a podcast, but we will be back soon. And we've got to do a little bit of a preview podcast before the season starts and we really get going in earnest. Thanks to all of you that follow us here on YouTube, and those of you that are paying attention to us on socials. We're at STCF715 on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Please comment. Please like our videos. Let us know what you'd like to see, ways that we can get better. Otherwise, we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thanks. Until next time.